Happy Blue White Week Wednesday, Penn State fans. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated, back with another edition of BWI Live. It's April 23. We're one day from the start of the 2025 NFL Draft. We are just hours away from hearing from James Franklin and some members of his program for the penultimate time this spring and the last time before Saturday's Blue-White game, which is, of course, set for 2 p.m. at Beaver Stadium. And so we got a lot to get to today. There's transfer portal stuff to discuss, as you can probably imagine, with the transfer portal window closing 2 days from today, as we talk on April 23rd at 10 a.m. T-Frank, it's a interesting final, or, almost final week of April. I can't remember the last time the NFL draft, obviously, the transfer portal window overlapping with the blue-white game is one thing. Yeah. But I don't recall the last time the draft and the blue-white game.
It's been a long time.
But it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been probably 10 years or so, I want to say. They moved the draft later, and I was so happy about that. And then, of course, this week, this year, they moved the blue-white game later, and I didn't even pick up on that until last week because, I'm great with dates and times and things like that. So I love day 3 of the draft. And by love, I mean, I have a, that love-hate relationship with something where you're like, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to be here for every single pick, even though even I tune out in the 6th round. Right. But it is, it's a big day for a lot of Penn State football players who will have the chance to go in the draft in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds coming up on Saturday. So, a lot of stuff going on this week, and we'll talk a little bit about the draft coming up in just a few minutes here.
Well, good morning to everyone here with us live in the chat. If you're listening on replay, thanks for being with us and taking us with you, whatever you're up to. While you listen to the show, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and leave us a review and a question on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio, and we will get to it later in the show, which is our plan for later in this show. So, of course, leave your comments in the YouTube section as well, and we'll get to as many as we can. T-Frank, it was maybe the busiest Tuesday. It's funny because we spent the last 4 Tuesdays, starting with the opening news conference of the spring, focused on practice, focused on hearing from James Franklin. The rhythm of the practice schedule changed for Penn State here in the final week of spring practice. Instead of going Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they're going Monday, Wednesday, today, Friday, and then, of course, Saturday, the blue-white game. And so Tuesday, what looked like it may be a slow afternoon in the Penn State world, was a busy one. The Nittany Lions pick up a class of 2026 commitment. They end up with one player going into the transfer portal. There's some guys that they are targeting in the portal. And one Nittany Lion who left last week picked his transfer destination. Let's start with him, T-Frank. I know that obviously there's still a couple guys that need to pick where they're going to play next. J.B. Nelson, the first Nittany Lion in, is not the initial player to pick a new school. That was actually John Mitchell, the cornerback, picked Georgia Tech over the weekend. And then on Tuesday, the expected became reality with Tamir Robinson, former Penn State linebacker, picking USC. Yeah. I was talking to a writer over at our On3 USC site, and he was asking, I asked him, he was asking for feedback on Robinson. And so my response after I gave him that was, what's the depth chart situation? And he asked me if I had looked at it to see if my name was on it, because that's how slim they are at inside linebacker. So upon learning that, certainly the pick makes sense. He'll stay in the Big Ten, has enough eligibility left, T-Frank, to potentially come back to Beaver Stadium with the Trojans next year when they come to State College.
Yeah, and I think that's a good fit because obviously Tamir wants to play, and it's a similar enough scheme, a cousin of, the Brent Pry defensive tree that Penn State has been a part of during James Franklin's tenure. So it is a zone-based system. I don't, he's going to be a Mike linebacker for them. He'll, be in the box and commanding the run game. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes because Tamir, I think, is talented, and I think he could have played at Penn State for sure. Yep. The timeline of that was the issue, and I think the confidence and the ability to take all of that talent and play fast because he's not slow, but he was very tentative on the field. How does that change when you're going to a team? It's the same thing I said with K-Mac last year. If you're going to be trying to pick up a new defensive system, learn a new culture, he's going from Pittsburgh to State College to Los Angeles, California.
They're all exactly alike. I'm not sure.
Totally the same. Yeah, absolutely the same. So, there's all these layers of he's got to overcome his own weaknesses, which are also a part of the transition of playing linebacker. But the good news is he's going to get to play, and he's going to be able to work those things out on the field. Bad news is he's going to work those things out on the field if he's, they're slotting him as a starter. So long-term, great pickup for USC. I don't know if it solves their problems this year just because of all those kind of issues of learning the defense, culture, etc.
Yeah, depth is usually what programs will take in the spring transfer portal window. You never know what you're going to end up with, but that is somewhat of the conversation we'll move to next with Penn State, who is obviously looking for help at any position, depth or otherwise. And we knew coming into the spring, T. Frank, that wide receiver was going to be a spot that Penn State was interested in adding. There's one name we know who visited last week, and there's one name who they've been connected to that we're a little bit leery on. So let's run through both of those guys quick, and then we'll see what comes up in the chat. Because anytime we talk receivers, it comes up in the chat. So go ahead. Run
it's just going to explode and derail the entire show. So we've talked a lot about Trebor Pena here on the show and kind of broken down what we think he is and how he can fit into the offense. And so now he's visiting USC, UCLA, and Miami. Again, what are the three common connections there? Sunshine and dollar signs. I think UCLA Maine isn't as aggressive with NIL, but then again,
maybe until they land at Nico, then you have to reassess that conversation.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. And then that's just speaking from a place of ignorance, not having any intel on whether they are or they aren't. They just haven't been.
Of course, Nico may not have got. Well, let's just say he may not have. He certainly did not get what he was going to get potentially at Tennessee, either what he was supposed to get or what he wanted to get. So yeah, there's a fair point to be made there about UCLA not needing to be a NIL behemoth to land him based on the way everything played out. But yeah you're right. Pena, the three places he's interested in are all schools that seem to be connected to every guy in the portal. It just feels that way.
And, I wouldn't say USC's quarterback situation feels great after last year, but Lincoln Riley is a really good offensive mind. So the place I look at here and I see the major threat to Penn State would be Miami, because you look at what they did last year with Xavier Restrepo I don't need quarterbacks anymore, so I forget the name of the guy at the top of the draft here. I've heard it 1,000 times. But the Miami quarterback that's going to go number 1 overall to the Titans, Cam Ward.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was
what they were able to
do
do
as well
with getting Cam Ward, and now they got Carson Beck in Miami. That is from featuring a slot receiver standpoint.
Yeah.
That'd be a very good offense. They have last year to prove it, and the volume of catches you can get in that offense, obvious by what they did last year, would be, I think, the biggest threat. It just becomes, can he get that professional approach? Is Carson Beck, is Drew Aller, what's the best quarterback situation? What's the best opportunity for him to kind of not just get a lot of catches, because we saw that happen at Syracuse, but NFL translatable routes, NFL translatable concepts. So I think Penn State is in the mix because their drop back passing game is absolutely part of that. But I would say, like, of those three, the serious threat to me would be Miami, because they can provide the on-field fit and, whatever they want from the NIL perspective, because they are very competitive in that sense.
Right. And so the thing I'm watching for here as this recruitment continues to play out is the visits have been reported, as in those are the schools he is going to visit.
Yep.
The answer has yet to be when those visits are taking place. So we know he obviously popped up in State College last Friday. That was reported when he got there. As of 10:10 a.m., and as this show unfolds for the next hour, we will let you know if we learn anything about when he's visiting and where. But as of this moment in time, those visits, if they are happening today or yesterday or tomorrow, not reported yet. So that's another thing to keep an eye on here, too. One thing to say you're going to visit, but, those conversations always progress, continue until they're actually set up. So we'll see. Pete Nakos at On 3 continuing to say that Penn State is, he may be a Penn State lean. He called him a front runner earlier this week. So time will tell on that front, T. Frank, but certainly an interesting player that Penn State could potentially add out of the transfer portal, and time will tell if they can get that done. Remember, important reminder, you don't have to pick your school by the time the portal closes at 11:59 p.m. on Friday. You just have to be in the portal. And so these recruitments could extend beyond that deadline, which is set for later this week.
Which, again, is not smart. So, like, there is always the business aspect, and then there is the football aspect. And so It is always interesting. Certain positions, you shouldn't take your time. You should try and find a situation and try to get up to speed as soon as possible. But
Right.
these two things are totally divorced. Like, this is my biggest problem is it feels like the football decisions don't matter. And when we're talking about NIL and we're talking about players that have real NFL potential, so like for certain players, this is what they're going to get in terms of their life earnings in football. This is going to be the bulk of it. But there are a lot of guys out there that are transferring for the money, like they're being induced into the portal and then they're going to go to a different school. And like, it has absolutely nothing to do with what's the quickest path to being good at football, maximizing your talent, being featured in the right way, and getting to the NFL where the real money is. This is it, especially in the spring,
right,
is absolutely counter to any of those ideas, unless you're going to a system with a coach that you already know.
Right.
And so, like, I don't know. Like, if you're going to go into the portal, I don't think you should be taking free agency visits into May. You need to learn your playbook.
And it's simple as that. And so some guys will, some guys won't. I mean, in some respects, it'll happen by default since you could go into the portal. Again, compliance departments do have 48 hours to submit the paperwork. So in theory, and this is going to, I know I can see this coming from a mile away. It's going to make people mad on Sunday when guys are showing up in the portal. And it's because that compliance piece is you have 48 hours from the deadline, which would be 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, to officially have the paperwork processed. And so it's going to be a busy weekend. We'll see what happens. And obviously, Penn State lost its fifth player. Well, one more thing on this wide receiver conversation before we dip back into that. Keelan Marion is a BYU receiver who Penn State has reportedly been interested in, made contact with, what have you. Again, as of now, he has not set a visit to Penn State. There's not a whole lot of smoke there. He's a guy that, this receiver, is a position that a lot of guys go in, and I think everyone's, fishing at this point, and everyone's throwing their line in the water as soon as they think maybe somebody could interest them. And that's what you have to do. And then, at some point you might just say, we're going to let that one swim. So Keelan, but you looked into him a little bit. Again, not a lot of connection outside of one report to Penn State at the moment. But when you're talking about maybe adding a receiver in the spring, almost everyone that goes in at some point is somebody that Penn State may be interested in or have contact with.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get to me. It's also about how does he fit into the picture? What is the profile that Penn State is interested in from a talent and usage standpoint? And I got maybe I maybe saw 10 clips so far, so not doing a whole lot of in-depth research here. But some of the advanced metrics tell you how he was used, which leans into you're probably not asking a slow receiver to be your deep threat. And for BYU, he didn't start for most of the year. Very limited targets in the season, but he did average 14 yards a catch, 16 yard average depth of target, which is really deep. So like his average depth of target is 5-6 yards past the first down mark. So he's a deep threat. I don't know if he's 6 foot 195 because that's what we thought Trebor Pena was, and I don't know that that's what he ended up being. So there is this like lying of the depth chart and the roster and all those things.
Sure.
But he does look like a guy that would be a field stretcher to go and pair with Devontae Ross, and I like that. Of the two things that Penn State needs, they need good receivers. Number one, full stop. So don't misconstrue what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But if you were to ask me, what does Penn State need in this offense? I would say they probably need a little more speed. The speed they have, the talent they have is young. And so you've got Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson, Liam Clifford as the are you so angry with what I'm saying? This is a receiver conversation get you so mad that you're smacking your mic off the table?
Not yet, but soon. No, I'm just kidding.
So, like, I think they need, and maybe this is my bias, is like what I think you want to try and be in this passing game, which is aggressive and explosive downfield. They have the running backs and the tight ends to take care of the first 10 yards of the field. And I'm oversimplifying this, right? But you're going to get those guys and those targets within that area because that's what those guys are capable of. If you're a running back who lines up 7 yards deep in the backfield and you want to run a 15-yard dig route, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer. Like a wheel route coming out of the backfield is so much easier to defend. Right. You're winning that because of matchup, because of the linebacker you're hoping isn't as fast, or because of surprise, not because of like tactical ability. So receivers, especially in an offense that wants to be explosive, aggressive, and threaten every part of the field, they need some guys that are field stretchers. I think Trebor Pena did it in his own way from the slot, and you need somebody that can run downfield. And they have a couple of guys that you could say could get open deep, but so far the only guy that's a proven deep threat is Devontae Ross, and he proved it at Troy. So I think there's still projection of the guys they got on the roster right now. Take some more projections. Like, that's fine. That makes a lot of sense. And so I think that there is a fit here, but I don't know beyond that, like, what's the quality of the lottery ticket? And that's always, to me, important. I would say probably not the level that, if it moved the needle, Penn State would have had him on campus already, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part of this spring transfer portal window, when you only have 10 days to both have guys go in and then evaluate them, get them on campus, and figure out, because like we talked about a minute ago, some will take their time making a decision, but most are going to be quick. A lot of them know where they're going before they even go in. And so for Penn State, I think that when you look at the receiver conversation of what's out there, like I said a minute ago, they're fishing for sure. Every guy that goes in, they throw a line. It's easier to keep your line into not. To your point, it's easier to be careful with playing the lottery than going, diving headfirst into it and trying, just hoping for the best. So
yeah,
evaluations are important to Penn State. We know that. Relationships are important to Penn State. We know that. So we'll see. They have time to land somebody, with Pena still obviously out there. And some other guys will probably go in too over the next few days. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, unsure if Penn State gets a guy in this window, which is kind of what the expectation was going in, T. Frank. And we knew they'd look. We didn't know if they'd get anyone. And we sit now, the portal opened a week ago, still in kind of the same boat with that conversation.
It kind of reminds me of, you go to, does Harrisburg have like garage sale days? Where I grew up, like would get, there was like it was called the Sugar Grove Sale Days. And it was literally a day. I don't know why we pluralized it, because that's, Pennsylvania, America for you. But everyone would go and put their stuff out, right? It was just one giant garage sale for the entire town.
Yep. And
I was a kid, and I wanted to buy something. I wanted something, because that's what it was about. It was going and finding treasures, right? What if you're just buying something to buy something? Does that help you? Like, I know that's the impulse. I know I feel that in, these conversations of like, they could use another receiver. But if you're bringing home a VHS of Dante's Inferno from 1997, and that's your treasure in this particular garage sale, is that really gonna like enhance your life? Do you have a VCR player anymore? Like, do you understand? Like, I know that we're going way off.
No, but the concept's the same. Do you want to buy just to buy, or do you want to buy to make your, in this case, football team receivers room better? Right. And I think that is the fair question to ask. I think Penn State did that in the winter, in terms of they were obviously with Hudson and Ross, two guys they felt good about. They knew, look, they had to do something, right? They lost guys, but they didn't just have to go get anyone and everyone. And I think they're proving that here in this spring window, where they're being selective and not buying just to buy. Because they wanted to buy just to buy, T. Frank, they could have. They could have found some way somehow to do that. So far, they have not. And I think that that's the fine line you have to walk in the transfer portal age, and it's not a fun one, I imagine, for those in the Lash building to do. But sometimes that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, blue-white game, we're going to be talking about that here in just 1 second. I want to remind everybody, if you haven't yet, we're closing our contest on blue-white weekend. So if you subscribe between now and the blue-white game, between now and Saturday, you're automatically entered to win a subscription to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We're picking 5 winners. We'll announce them next Tuesday on the live show. Of something that I want to make sure everyone's aware of, because we've had a lot of people subscribe, but not all the numbers match the number of people that I have in my document. You have to have your subscriptions on YouTube public. That way I can see who has subscribed, and then I can put you into the contest. And we're giving away a yearly subscription. So if you want to get in right now, subscribe right now. You don't want to wait. You don't want to go through the lottery. That's fine. the contest. But just $1 for the first week is where you can go and check out the information about the transfer portal, some of the more detailed stuff when we get into players that have been recruited. I watched Delaware high school film yesterday and broke that down. That came out before the show today. So all kinds of great stuff. Greg's got his reporting, and of course everything from Nate, Sean, and Ryan. All great stuff at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Be sure to check us out there because it is going to be a busy few days on the Penn State front, and that starts tonight. Obviously, Penn State, like we said, usually practices on Tuesday. We have been over there the last 3-4 Tuesdays, whatever it may be at this point, and then brought you info about that on Wednesday. Well, this time it's a little bit different. Like we said, Penn State altered its final practice schedule of the week, and so Penn State will be on the practice field tonight. We will be over at the Lash Building in Haluba Hall. We'll hear from James Franklin and some of his staff members and players afterward. T. Frank, but this is where I'll start the bidding here, and for those of you who we appreciate being with us on most, if not every Wednesday, this is where we tell you what we're going to look for tonight, and then we'll obviously bring that information to you over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But to me, the most important thing about today is what, if you're watching on YouTube, either live or on replay, you see T. Frank's practice clips are outside in the sun on the fields between the Lash Building and Haluba Hall. And that is the thing I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah.
Penn State has been inside for multiple weeks when we've been there on Tuesdays because of rain and wind and things like that. They should be back outside tonight, T. Frank. And so we will get a better chance to see the offense and defensive linemen who are usually on the very far side of Haluba Hall away from where we are at. And so I'll be curious to see what those groups look like here as we move into the final days before the blue-white game. We haven't, again, seen those guys since the first practice that was outdoors. So that's where I'm going to go first, is to check out the offense and the defensive lines and just see what we can notice, who's there, who's not, and what those guys are working on at this stage of the spring.
Yeah, and I'm the part that I'm going to try. I'm looking for things I'm bad at so I don't miss something like, the head count, who's there, who's not there. And obviously with the portal closing this weekend, that's going to be everything. Everyone's on high alert for missing players. But don't forget, this is the time of year. James Franklin talks about this at the end of every spring of that was a physical, long 15 practices. They don't let up when guys get bumps and bruises. So we've seen a good number of those guys that have not been at practice, and maybe we get a glimpse of them later, or maybe we get the reporting that they were just held out with some sort of not injury long term, but something that was it bumps and bruises, as James Franklin would say. So trying to balance of who's there and then understanding who's bumped up a little bit, giving us an idea of what to expect for the blue-white game, who's going to be able to participate in the blue-white game, and who's going to be in street clothes with, hanging on the sidelines with their friends wearing sunglasses and hoodies.
Right, and we're going to get into that conversation here in just a minute, but it is an important one because Penn State is not going to have a traditional blue-white game, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later in the show. One other thing I want to go look for, T. Frank, tonight when we get there, after I check out the offense and defensive lines, is the linebacking group. So we know that Tony Rojas has not been available this spring after having some offseason cleanup. We know that Keon Wiley has been working his way back to the practice field. And so when we've seen the linebackers in action, it's been Dom DeLuca and Tamir Robinson at the top of the position group for Dan Connor throughout the spring practices we've been to. Well, the last one we were at, Tamir Robinson was on the roster. The next one we'll be at, he is not on the roster. So interested to see who behind him Penn State moves up in line to take those next snaps behind Dom DeLuca. And again, the position drills we see are not always indicative of the depth chart because sometimes they're a little bit scattered. And that seems more so on defense than offense. I don't know if you agree, but you can't necessarily take all of those lines with a complete certainty. But it goes without saying that somebody has to be behind Dom DeLuca tonight. And so I'll be curious to see who that is as Dan Connor, again, works through another practice without Tamir Robinson, but the first one that we're at.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation in kind of the microcosm of the camp battles that we haven't really gotten a sense to evaluate. I'd say there's a couple on defense that we haven't really gotten a sense to evaluate. Defensive tackle is another one, and then the nickel. Who's going to be the nickel, because we haven't seen some of the guys out there, Zion Tracy and King Mac that we expect to be part of that competition. So the good thing is young guys are getting reps. The bad thing is, are those young guys going to be the starters? I don't know that we know. So, kind of projecting forward, are any of those guys back? We talk about even somebody I've been looking for every week is Nolan Rucci, because James Franklin left the door open for, maybe he'd be back for the, at some point. Can't rule it out. It's always great, right? When he's like, the door's open. The door might not even exist. It might be a wall that was been fully filled in, and there's just no door. There's no handle. But he makes it sound like there's a door for him or denied Dennis Sutton to be there. So just keeping an eye out for those guys, who's healthy, who's working their way back. Because James Franklin said it last night on the radio show. These practices are gold. They are super important for the team. And if you're not practicing, you are missing out. And I know that we kind of say you're still there. You're still participating. These guys aren't just off in Bellefonte hanging out. They have to get through the reps. Like, there are important things that happen at practice that you have to be a part of. And so, if you can get any of those guys even back for the final week, I think that's important.
I completely agree. And we'll see if that's the case. And the one caveat I'll say is that sometimes I think when we're there early in practice, those guys may be finishing up some rehab work or whatever it might be. And then I think some of them at least can come out a little bit later when we are gone. And that's all, of course, by design. So we'll see who is there and then get a better feel for things on Saturday at the Blue-White game. T-Frank, because it's kind of in this conversation where I opened the bidding for this part of the show, I'm going to go to the comment section here. James asked, what kind of feel do you guys have for the defensive tackles for this upcoming season? What do the coaches feel about the defensive tackles? That's one of the reasons I want to start with the defensive line, or at least make my way there at some point this evening, because I personally am concerned about that group. I mean, let's go down. I'm not saying that Joseph Mapoyi, who went into the portal yesterday, it was a loss for this season, because I don't think he was ready to play, but you don't need to be the world's foremost expert in football to look at the Penn State depth chart that starts with Zane Durant at defensive tackle. It moves on to Alonzo Ford Jr., who's still working his way back from injury. Xavier Gilliam has clearly separated from his classmates and teammates as that third guy, or in the case of Ford not being there, the second guy this spring. But then it's all unproven. And, even Gilliam's unproven, obviously. Ty Blanding, Caleb Artif, Sam Siafa, Liam Andrews, DeAndre Cook, Randy Adarica, Owen Wafel. I mean, you have a long list of guys at that position that are not don't have a ton of experience, just don't have the game reps that you would prefer to have at that spot. And so to me, it's a concern. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit, the way you look, I'm sensing you're not as concerned as I am, but
no, I am.
I think it's a problem. I do. And I don't, and the bigger problem is I'm not sure how you fix it quickly.
Yeah, this is the problem of having that downward pressure on the room from having those veterans staying around for so long, is because, I don't have it off the top of my head, the number of defensive tackles that transferred out that are playing elsewhere, but just generally when you're relying on those guys, again, this isn't the NFL where they're going to stick around and sign a new contract. So you have just guys that didn't work out over the last couple of years, including, and I'm not saying that his career is over, but Caleb Artis not being part of this conversation in a real way, where he's at the bottom in that conversation with some of the young guys, as opposed to James Franklin saying, we feel good about X. Zane Durant, Xavier Gilliam, and Alonzo Ford. What if Caleb Artis was a part of that conversation? And I know that injuries have been a part of this for him, and he's also been banged up this spring, but that's just kind of the point, is the veterans, the guys that aren't Zane Durant that you would have hoped would have been participating over the last couple of years, it hasn't really worked out for them yet, where they've been able to take that step. And I'm using Artis as an example, the one that came to mind, not necessarily like it's all on him, just generally, those juniors, redshirt sophomores, there aren't enough of those guys on the roster that have made that transition. And part of that is because we haven't gotten a chance to see them on the field. And a lot of those reps were taken up by guys that have moved on from the program. So yeah, I absolutely think that, as good as it is, like, there are these long-term problems that build up, and then you have to address them in a moment like now. And the good thing is Xavier Gilliam, I think, is going to be really good. But again, you're asking him to be Zane Durant from 2023. And I just don't know. That's a wild card. We saw Zane Durant play in 20 as a freshman, and he looked really good. We didn't see Gilliam play last year, so our understanding of the situation beyond what he looks like and how he's progressed and the conversation around him, I like having some evidence, some footage, some film in a game to say, okay, it's not just a projection. I know these traits play.
Yeah, and it's a reminder of how hard it is to make it in the NFL draft, because Penn State would take Josiah Izzard and Devon J. Thomas back in a heartbeat. Neither guy expected to go in the draft this weekend. Certainly will have an undrafted free agent opportunity, I'm sure. But, you sometimes take those guys for granted.
Yeah.
Sean Fitz, the biggest Derek Tangelo stand that there is, with good reason. An underappreciated, underrated part of the Penn State defense a couple years ago. And Penn State would certainly take somebody like him, too. Z-Man says in the chat, won't potentially, what he's talking about is not these guys not having game film, game reps, as we've been talking about with the defensive tackles. It says it won't be an issue until Oregon in late September will have some time to develop on the field early. It's true.
Yeah.
The problem is you're not going to have game reps against the likes of Oregon until then either. That's the other end. That's the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah. Big Ten reps versus non-conference reps. I agree. I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
But,
certainly I do too. Yes.
Yeah. What is that preparing you for? I guess, like, is there enough value in those 120 snaps in a football game, let's just say, for those players to have them ready for the speed of Oregon? I don't know. And it's an unknown. And the unfair thing is, you and I can say we don't know until we find out, which is against Oregon. We will have a better idea. And Z-Man is absolutely right. We will have a better idea. Because if Xavier 100%. Gilliam comes out and is throwing guards to the ground, then we have a sense of, like, okay, this is so far above the competition right now that it should play and should be like a really good assessment. And then, of course, we'll get a chance to see where Alonzo Ford is on his recovery in those first 3 weeks, presumably to give you the confidence barometer of where he is in comparison to, fully healthy. And I think that's going to be, for me, something I'm watching for in camp and early in the year to, maybe make some of these bad feelings go away, some of these bad vibes go away.
Well, we will have the latest from the practice field tonight at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's $1 for 1 week of access and billed annually from there. Join us today for practice insights and the latest from the Penn State football program as they get ready for the Blue-White game. On Saturday at Beaver Stadium, kickoff is at 2 p.m. on no TV. I'm so used to saying a television station after that. There is no TV.
It's on the radio.
It is on the radio, but there is no TV, so that means you have to follow along with us. We look forward to you all being with us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We're going to have the full team there for live updates and analysis before, during, and after the game. All the recruiting news you need to know, all the on-field stuff you need to know, any transfer portal happenings that take place. We're going to have that all for you on both, throughout the rest of the week, but also throughout Saturday as well. So if you can't make it to Beaver Stadium, come along with us. I can't promise we're going to try and fit all 5 of us in T. Frank's camera lens at the end, but we'll do something, I'm sure. So check out, whether it's BlueWhiteIllustrated.com or here on the YouTube channel as well. We'll have you covered completely from State College this weekend.
Yeah, we got a live show, by the way, at 1 p.m. Before the game as well. Speaking of the radio, 99.5 The Bust and some of the local radio stations here, plus on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. So if you can't make it, we'll be here for you to give you a preview and a rundown of everything in detail. And then, of course, if you want to listen to the game and you want to get our recap of everything, we got you covered on that side as well.
Well, we look forward to that, T. Frank. We also look forward to getting some more information tonight from James Franklin about what exactly the blue-white game will look like. So he said earlier this spring, and I actually dating as far back, I think, to his February. Maybe that was Pat Kraft talking, but that it would be a non-traditional experience, and that at the time of his first comments in the spring, the start of spring, which was late March, he had said that it would probably be some live periods, some thud periods, which is form tackling, but not taking guys to the ground.
Yep.
And then he offered a new update, and you can read his full radio show recap from Nate Bauer over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But as for the quote itself, he said the one difference for this blue-white game compared to past years is that the first quarter will probably go thud tempo, where we won't tackle to the ground and won't go live, so that we can play the majority of the team in that. And then transition after that, the second, third, and fourth quarters go live live so we can evaluate some of the younger players on the roster and allow them to compete. And some of those guys, too, between spring ball and summer camp, are still competing to get onto the 105-man roster that Penn State will have to implement if the House versus NCAA settlement takes place and puts a 105-man roster cap in place for the upcoming season. So, sounds about what I would expect. He'll get into some more details potentially tonight, but I think it's fair to say, and tell me if you disagree, but I think it's fair to say that this is going to look a lot more like a traditional practice than a traditional blue-white scrimmage. And they've set fans up for that for a while now. That should be no secret to anyone.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of cool. Well, two things. First off, it's a smart way to allow fans to see the stars, to see Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and have essentially zero risk, right? See Drew Aller play without having to worry about the issues of the injuries and all the things that they don't want to put the wear and tear on these guys' body. So that feels like a good compromise, but then it also gives you an insight if, you want to be inside practice, right? Well, this is as close as you're going to get to watching a scrimmage. And so I think that's kind of cool if you view it from that way. And then there's going to be enough of a structure because it has to be on the radio, like we've talked about. So there's going to be at least a little bit of that, instead of like they can stop and start and do, like whatever. It is going to be whatever it is, and they're going to control the flow of it. But there will be, I think, a little bit of traditional structure to it as well.
Yeah, I get that same sense too. But I do think that unlike the years where they've played, 4 12-minute quarters or whatever, I would expect it's going to be more broken up than that. I would expect you're going to get into some situations where, it's 4th and 2 at the 30, and they're going towards the end zone, and the pass falls incomplete, and all of a sudden they're doing red zone work up at the 20, and you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, how that's not right. But I think you could see some of that where the result of a drive may turn into a situational work that does not necessarily equal the outcome of what the drive would have been in a game. So I'm looking forward to it. As Z-Man says in the chat, it looks like there is going to be a little bit of rain Friday night into Saturday morning, but the rain should clear out. Maybe some of you will still have a little bit, depending on how early you start your tailgate, might have a little bit leftover moisture. The grass lots are probably going to be wet, but looks like it should be a dry day. It's going to be some wind in the afternoon as well. But if you're looking forward to coming to State College and Beaver Stadium, we'll look forward to seeing you possibly in the lots or in the stands. Don't forget, and we'll promote this, I think, tomorrow too, T. Frank, but we'll have a blue-white visitors guide, essentially. We have a version of it up right now at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but we'll post another one later this week, probably Friday, that gives you all the info about parking and where you can go into the stadium, where you can sit. Let's not forget, as we sit here and talk, it is an active construction zone. So there are some things going on that, make this not more non-traditional than just what you'll see on the field. So be sure to go check that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But I guess my main thing is this. It may not be for everyone, but the idea of, Nebraska is they weren't going to hold a spring game. Now they're holding a scrimmage for guys who may not make the 105-man roster if that roster cap goes into effect.
That kind of feels like the Hunger Games. I don't like that. I don't like that. I guess I understand. Like, are they at least going to give the footage out there for those players to then go and try and find a home?
I think that's the idea, right? Okay. To give those guys enough tape to take with them. The problem is, it's a strange conversation to have, man. That's like, once you pick those guys, then what is your message to them? I'm sure you have to have an honest conversation with them, right? But some will take it better than others. Anyway, point being, I think in periods 2, or maybe not so much in 2, but in 3 and 4 on Saturday at Beaver Stadium, if you're someone who likes to learn about the young Penn State players, the ones who have not received a ton of game reps, maybe they redshirted last year, maybe they just enrolled in January. Like, it feels to me like periods 3 and 4 of this event on Saturday are going to be for the young guys, the guys that you either last saw tape of when they were in high school or maybe only saw against the Kent States of the world last year. So I look forward to that. Again, you can't always take a ton from there's a great story at our
South
rough
Carolina outline.
Yeah,
right?
You get a rough
outline.
Yep. There's a great story at our South Carolina site. Basically, the 5 don'ts of spring practice scrimmages. And the number 1 is don't read too much into it. Don't go to the extremes. If and everyone can remember who the blue-white MVP was, everyone cannot remember who it is because it's always someone who shines on that day and may have a role down the road, but is not someone who's going to start or, in most years anyway, be a big role player for Penn State later that year.
Yeah. Well, the last couple have Dom DeLuca was one, and then Colin Dinkins last year didn't totally come to fruition, but he's been one of the main nickels so far this spring because they've been down the depth chart, so he's got an opportunity. I think those things do allow young players, if they have the talent, to flash and then show you. But yeah, we're not talking back in the day when I had a friend whose brother was on the team and he got like 7 carries in the fourth quarter. It's like, that's not what we're talking about here. There are opportunities to get a little bit of an informational idea, but I remember to the point, I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, but I'm just reminiscing about old blue-white games, right?
Right.
Do you remember when Mac Hippenhammer made a couple of big plays?
Yep.
And then KJ Hamler made a big play, but it was like, hey, those guys are kind of on the same track. And then, of course, Mac Hippenhammer played baseball, and KJ Hamler was a 4-star recruit. And we all know kind of where those two roads diverge. But there are, I think, flashes and windows into who you can't deny when a guy looks like he can play. And when you get a chance to see that, no matter when you see it, it is good to know and get that information.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. Again, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for all of your blue-white game coverage. And, of course, like I said, we will learn more about that setup and things when we hear from James Franklin later tonight. T-Frank, we're going to move on to something else here, but we should have covered this in the practice portion of the show. But let's do it now. Why not? There's no rules, as James Franklin said last week. And speaking of things he said, beyond the blue-white conversation, what are you looking for from him tonight? This will be his, I believe, 4th or 5th news conference of the spring. And we've covered mostly everything you could expect to, like how Jim Knowles is fitting in, how Stan Drayton is fitting in, where the defense is compared to the offense. Like all of the hits have been played so far for the most part. It was heavy on spring transfer portal window talk last week. I'm not sure if there's something that's going to be beat over the head this week. Maybe not. Time will tell. But anything come to mind for you in terms of what you're looking for, either to hear from him or ask him tonight?
Yeah, all the things I really want to know are things that aren't going to come up. Like, the things I've talked about here ad nauseum on the channel that I think are important, of how are they structuring the defense? How much versatility are they baking into the plan? Are they going to have everybody as drop DNs? Are they going to move guys around the formation on the front? Moving a D end or somebody around the formation? Do they have like a jack linebacker? And then I guess maybe the thing I do want to know is, with as many guys out as they've had, even bumps and bruises, not just the main names we talk about with Anthony Donko, have there been young guys that have taken these reps and made themselves part of the conversation? And again, I'm thinking about the defense because it's a problem they have to solve in terms of a good problem of the personnel and the diversity they have at certain positions. I think it makes up the personality of the defense with who's playing certain positions. Are any of those young guys playing their way into the conversation, either at linebacker or at nickel corner, or to a lesser degree on the outside at corner in that 4th corner spot, or a D end? Like, it feels like there is this opportunity, and I want to know like how much of that opportunity has been maximized to the point that it's changed your opinion.
Yes, and so the question to me is, on the off, who is the Xavier Gilliam on offense, if there is one? Who is a guy that has sort of slingshotted himself with the available reps toward closer to the top of his position group, right? And it may come at receiver, it may come at a different spot, I don't know, tight end. Obviously, there's some guys there. Khalil Dinkins, I think, is going to lead the way there, but Luke Reynolds was not, he's been in and out. So is there a guy that's taken advantage of that? Javen Williams, that's a good one. Christian, he's been talked about in a positive way.
So that's the problem, right? So far, all of the interesting camp battles have been on the shelf because linebacker, you have one guy transferring, a couple guys are young. There hasn't been a fully healthy linebacker room with Tony Rojas out, so there's not clarity there. Tight end, a camp battle that's really important. Well, you don't have Andrew Rappelier, and Luke Reynolds has been, dinged up for a little bit of this spring. And then the third running back competition, it feels like that one's not going to be settled for a while. So it is interesting. the main things we would have focused on coming into the season, even the right tackle battle, adding in a third name brings less clarity than more clarity to that position.
Well, be sure to check back here on the YouTube channel for James Franklin's full press conference tonight. Whatever he has to say, we'll bring it to you right here at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and on the BWI YouTube channel. T. Frank, let's move on to not the current Penn State football team, but the the past Penn State football team that will be the future NFL players and the next group of alumni to join the NFL draft community from Penn State lore. I have screwed up that transition tremendously, but stick with us. So Penn State heads to the draft weekend with the potential of making history. They have not had two players picked in the top 10 since LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown in 2000. Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren could become the first duo to do that since them, and I think most expect that to be the case. So let's start, I guess, just with the setup. Round 1, Thursday. Rounds 2 and 3, Friday. The rest of the draft is Saturday. Should be wrapping up just about the time we get out of Beaver Stadium, sometime like Saturday, early evening, I would think, based on history. And then the UDFA process starts in full.
Yeah.
But James Franklin said on the Penn State Coaches Show he will be in Green Bay for the draft. Abdul Carter is going to be there as well. Tyler Warren told us at Pro Day that he wanted to be home with his family. His grandparents, don't travel as much anymore, so he wanted to be home with them. So he was invited, but is staying home. Let's just start with those two, and then we'll get into kind of some bigger picture thoughts you have here on the rundown. But do you think they make history and become the first Penn State guys to go in the top 10 since 2000?
I think it's 50-50. It's gonna matter whether or not that second quarterback goes in the top 10.
Yeah.
And then the value that people see in the tight end room and some of those value decisions between a guy like Ashton Genty and Tyler Warren.
Right.
Because as much as I love Tyler Warren, it's going to sound like heresy, he is not the slam dunk all Madden tight end, in the NFL. He's the explosiveness, the top end speed. I think he's a good vertical threat. He's a contested catch guy. He's going to get you yards down the field. But we even saw here at Penn State, there was a limit to like the explosiveness of the offense where he's not Brock Bowers. He's not half a wide receiver. And then there are some questions by the draft industrial complex, which is a trademark of just everyone on the internet that talks about the draft, about whether or not he's a good enough blocker. And I know the Penn State fans are going to say like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about?
Right.
On film, this is something I talked about. He was very good this year, so much better than he was previously. But the guy who was the real blocker, the guy who was digging out defensive ends, playing next to the tackle, doing the dirty work, that was Khalil Dinkins.
Right.
Now, part of that is he earned the role of move piece, so you don't just pluck him next to the tackle and have him run block. He did struggle at times with staying on some of those blocks and getting into like really good double teams and moving guys off the ball that were of his talent, of his size. And so I think there's a question about projection, which could make him, 15th, in the first round. Maybe he gets to Indianapolis. And so they're going to have 2 first-round draft picks, 2 in the top 10. I think the wild cards are going to be kind of the value, the positional value, and then what people see as his upside, because he's the ultimate high-floor player. He's going to come in and be everything you saw on the field. He's going to work hard. He's going to be maximizing his talent. I thought of him like TJ Hawkinson, and that was a guy that went in the first round. I think he was also a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I would have picked that player in the top 10.
Right. And so the other thing you always have to remember is the trades and how that impacts things. And we've seen Penn State guys who went into the night as surefire first-round picks. Joey Porter Jr. comes to mind. Fall out of the first round. Obviously, there was one less pick that year, and I think
went 32nd.
Penn State still kind of counts him as a first-round pick in some way, shape, or form, or Penn State fans do at least. There's been guys on that back burner like Odafe Owe who went late in the first round. That's not the case this year. Like they will have 2 first-round picks, but I agree with you when you're talking, is he a top 10 or a top 15 pick? Number one, again, the value proposition is the first question, but then the trade question is, if the current pick order of picks stays as it is, I think he's in the top 10. But if there's a bunch of movement, I think he slides a bit, and it's not anything he did wrong. It's just the way teams value the pick slot, what they have to give up to move up to get who they want. And so, making predictions, if you made me write one in pen, I've gone back and forth on this all morning. I think he's probably, I would say the Jets make sense at 7 for sure. The Bears make sense at 10. You mentioned the Colts a little bit later. They make sense. And somebody could always, if they feel like he's the piece, one of the pieces they need to revitalize, recharge, or keep their offense going, could always move up and get him. You just never know. I mean, it's not too many times people trade up for a tight end.
I do think the Bears are the best possible fit there,
right?
Because of the Ben Johnson, the offensive system, what they want to be. He fits that perfectly. So, you convinced me. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick because the fit there makes a lot of sense.
So to me, I don't think there's any question. I wrote this over at the Lions Den forum at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com earlier this week. I could always be wrong. I'm wrong a lot, as any of you that follow this show frequently know. But Abdul Carter to the Giants at number 3 seems to be, I don't want to say written in pen and cemented, but pretty darn close at this moment in time.
Oh, I just think I think third overall pick, team TBD, because I think those teams are trying right now to trade out of the top 10 or at least trade out of the top 5 because they want to get a haul for that player. Because it doesn't necessarily fit their need in the moment. And Abdul Carter as trade bait might be as valuable to get future picks because the Giants aren't going anywhere this year. They need to get a quarterback next year. Stockpiling ammunition makes a lot of sense. I just don't know I don't know who's going to be trading up. That's the part that I don't know.
Right. And that's the fun part of following the NFL draft. And we'll have live updates throughout the night at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. T. Frank, the question here, we don't need to get into predicting where KJ Winston goes, Jalen Reed goes. You're welcome to, but it becomes messy after the first. The first round's hard enough, and that's in theory the easiest one to figure out.
Right.
But I mean, over under, 4. I think the number total should be 5. But let's go over under 5.5 draft picks. So
okay, I actually went back and forth between that. Should be 4.5 or 5.5. So on the rundown, it just says over under 4.5 players drafted. It was 5.5 for about half an hour, and then I changed it because this is the part where I think that we tend to have blue and white tinted glasses because we've covered them for so long.
Right.
But at the same time, you've done the work, and 5 is the number, right?
I think so. Like, I keep looking, and Kobe King seems pretty safe in almost every mock draft to go in the 5th or the 6th. Jalen Reed is in the same boat. Dane Brugler at The Athletic actually had a 4th round grade on him. So I feel pretty good about those two on Jalen Reed.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So then Kobe King's going to go. Maybe he slides a little bit further than 5th, but those two are going. We know KJ Winston's going, and we know that Abdul Carter and Tyler Warner are going. So there's your 5. And then is there somebody else? Is there it's Jalen? I think to me personally, I think it comes down to does someone take a late flyer on Jalen Kimber or do they not? Like I think that is the only part of this conversation that would require any thought to take the over or the under on 5.5. I think 4.5 is a dead over. I think 5.5 is probably a dead under. But like I said, maybe someone in that 7th round decides, you know what, we don't want to go through the but the process of letting him pick in the undrafted free agent process. We'll just pick him. And so I think that'll be the one guy to watch late on Saturday. But to me, it's a surefire 5. The fewest players they've had drafted in that case, if that ends up being the case, since 2020, another indication of just how many guys came back for this 2025 Penn State football season.
I just want to read off because I Izzard stats again. 6'3", 305, 25 reps of 225 on the bench, a 33.5 vert, which is which is the same as Jalen Kimber, a 9.5 broad, a 4.81 40-yard dash, and a 4.45 pro shuttle. Those are wild numbers for a dude who's 305 pounds.
Right.
He should be drafted. I don't think he's going to be. But it's just crazy the level of athletic skill that he has, and I think he's going to get picked up. He'd be the other guy. The point is he's the other guy that might be a wild card with Jalen Kimber. But for a guy who's never started, I don't know that you would take a draft pick that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably the issue there. Someone is going to give him a chance because you always take a chance on size. And when you pair it with those kind of measurables, I just don't know if it's going to be in the 257 picks that take place between Thursday and Saturday night. But undrafted free agent and be there at minicamp and all that stuff and have a chance to make an impact, yes, I think there's no question about that. So 2 guys to watch there. We'll follow the draft all weekend. Any other final thoughts there? I know we got some mailbag questions to get to.
Nah, just go Bills. That's all.
Yeah. So I did a predictions piece, even though I just said that predicting the rest of the rounds after the first one's impossible. But I did put one together this morning as I was prepping for the show. And you're going to like where I have one of the Penn State players picked to go. Check that out later. I guess I'll post that probably tomorrow over at
That's a tease. I'm absolutely, that worked on me 100%.
Yeah, it caught your eye. Yes. One question, let's just transition to the mailbag here. There's one in the chat I'm going to lead off with, and then we'll get to the ones we had previously. The average Penn State fan asked a question that most of you probably want to know. Will there be blue-white game highlights after it's over since fans can't watch it? Of course, you can watch it if you're there. Otherwise, obviously, there's no TV. Yeah, I would assume there's going to be some. I don't know what format that will take. I don't know if it'll be on social media. I don't know if it'll be on YouTube. I don't know if we'll be able to provide them for you. I don't know if Penn State plans. I'm sure Penn
there's
State
been
will
no
in some
clarity.
way, shape, or form. Right.
There's been no clarity about what it is. Yeah.
Right. As we sit here on Wednesday morning, there's no clarity on that yet. There will be stuff out there. There's no question.
Yeah. Even if you're trolling social media trying to find cell phone footage, there will be some of that for sure.
Yeah, it's a marketing a chance for Penn State, and there'll be opportunities to showcase guys that are not a risk to leave or be whatever. I don't even want to get into that conversation, but there'll be stuff out there. Definitely check back here. Definitely keep an eye out over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We'll provide you guys with as much as we can. And like I said, I'm sure Penn State is going to put some stuff out on its official channels as well. All right, mailbag questions we had from earlier in the week and earlier in the day. Let me see here.
I want to get to this one from Apple Podcasts because the reviewer 35 took me up in the offer and left us a 5-star review and asked a question. If you want to be a part of the BWI Mailbag, you're listening on the podcast version, you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review, 5 stars with your question, and we'll get it here on the show. The question wasn't worded super clearly. He says, or they say, how does Penn State approach a championship with game planning against a team by using talent and coaching that can match up with any team? So I'm assuming the question is, because the review was balanced team. So how do you prepare to beat any team on the schedule, even if you don't have a perfect squad? And I think this goes back to our conversation about the receivers. And it goes back to our conversation about the defensive tackles or just generally building a game plan. How do you get the most of a specific thing out of your positional skill group without emphasizing their negatives, right? Without exposing the offense overall to too many problems. So Penn State needs to build a wide receiver core that can do a little bit of everything, but to have a specific role in the offense and have it not be so narrowly tailored so that it's preventable, right? So it can't just be what I said earlier. It can't just be deep shots. You can't just have the receivers only run deep routes because then you can scheme for that. So you need to have enough diversity in the room while still having strengths that make the whole offense complete. And so that's, on the defensive side of the ball. I think that was the major problem they had last year was they just had that final piece they didn't have of that game-breaking element in the run game or the passing game that made them have to go on 15-play drives. Part of that was quarterback, too. Part of that was quarterback not making some of those more aggressive reads and not making some of those best possible scenarios. I think on the defensive side of the ball, the way they're going to build their coverage and the way they're going to support the pass rush by being good in coverage, I think that's one of those you can make up for some of your deficiencies by the way you play. And then I think the biggest wild card is how they use the defensive line. So that's why I want to know so much about the defense, because I think you can mask some of the losses they've had on the D line, but you can't completely negate a lack of talent up front. And I'm not saying they don't have talent, but they don't have the consistency of what they had last year at defensive tackle or the superstar ability in Abdul Carter. So they have to find a way to replace that.
All right. Next question comes from Ear to the Ground, and it says, which players do you not expect to see during the blue-white game? All right.
I'll let you take this one. You go for this one.
Well, I mean, let's just make it. So, again, I want to preface this by saying what I said earlier in the show is that sometimes we don't see guys at practice, and then they are able to come out later after we leave practice and do some things. So, what is the difference Saturday compared to when we're there is that the whole practice is, we're able to see it no matter how it shakes out, what it looks like, so on and so forth. And so, maybe some guys show up and do some things. I mean, I think Anthony Donko obviously is one that I would not expect to see out there. With the caveat, I could change my mind after tonight. Nolan Rucci seems probably doubtful at this point. Tony Rojas, doubtful. Andrew Rapplier, doubtful. And so I think that's where I would start the list. And then from there,
are there veterans? Yeah, there are veterans who we've seen that you don't expect to see a lot of or some at all, I guess.
I mean, so, what's funny? I was thinking about that comment Franklin made on the coaches show about the first period being live and then the second, third, thud, and then the second, third, and fourth being live. And it would be hilarious if that first live period was like 3.5 minutes and then all the rest of them were longer.
I was on the radio yesterday and I said, make sure you get in the stadium early, just because you don't know if the one ceremonial handoff by Drew Aller is the only time he plays.
Right. Exactly. So I definitely think you're going to see some of those guys limited. I don't think there's any question about that. All right. Last one before we get out of here. Poncho 570 asks, which player or position needs most to take advantage of the last week of spring practice? I think if you listen to most of the show, you'd probably know what our answer is going to be. But T. Frank, I'll let you lead off.
I think so. I'm going to go with any position that requires contact to be part of their growth perspective. So offensive, defensive line are easy ones, but I'm going to go linebacker because I think that there's a lot of information to download and not just to have it, but to apply it. So that position I think is especially important to have, even those thud periods of feeling out and seeing things and understanding how you fit into the defense and the structure of things. You only get the structure of things when you're all together. So I'm going to say linebacker as my number one answer.
Okay, then I'll take receiver. Simple as that.
Perfect.
It never gets any easier than just saying receiver. You can answer almost 3/4 of the questions about Penn State football by simply saying receiver and moving on with your day. T. Frank, any final thoughts, buddy?
Yeah, like I said, come check us out. Say hi if you're going to be in town for the blue-white game. 1 o'clock outside the Bryce Jordan Center. We're going to have the tailgate show as we always do before games, and we're going to have a good time. And then, of course, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can get in on the contest. I want to give you inside access to all the stuff that we do. So subscribe, and we'll make you part of the family. We'll make 5 people part of the family.
Awesome. Please don't forget to do that. Please don't forget to check out our practice updates here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and at bluewhiteillustrated.com. A lot more coming following this Wednesday edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you next time.